Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm the Takanome, and welcome to my humble slices, I have to remember this, of the internet that are my Twitch and YouTube channels. How is everyone doing today? Hope that you're having a good day today, maybe even had a spectacular Halloween yesterday if you were able to go trick-or-treating. If it was like where it is where I live in Chicago, well, hopefully you did not have to deal with rain. But, nevertheless, if your days have not been great, if today you're just thinking to yourself, boy, today was not the best day, I wish it could have been better, well, maybe this reading stream could be a bit of a bright spot to your day. And let's get this going again. Tonight, we are going to finish reading Clockwork Twist, Book 10, Time by Emily Thompson. Now, if you do not know who our author is tonight, well, allow me the opportunity to read their bio to you. So, who is Emily Thompson? Well, Emily Thompson is a non binary author and artist originally from Northern California. Although they adore steampunk and all things Victoriana, they also write science fiction and fantasy. After studying film and animation in university, Emily changed to a Japanese language focus and studied in Tokyo. After receiving a language degree and spending a number of years abroad, they now live in Washington and spend most of their free time writing in coffee shops, painting, crocheting plushies, coding, and playing lots of cozy video games. And for those who were part of the Halloween special last Saturday, you may recall that Emily Thompson was one of the authors who submitted a story for the special. And also, hello to Rudite, the author of tonight's story. Speaking of the Halloween special, I want to again thank everyone who participated in submitting a story. I was so impressed by the turnout of stories. I've been considering making this somewhat of a regular thing where we ask members of the writing community or anyone who just wants to give it a try to come up with a short story and submit it for the reading stream. They are, at the moment, thoughts that I have, but it may be thoughts that, well, I suppose would be worth implementing. Let's see. News. Any news for the channel or the reading stream in general? Well, as I mentioned, Halloween stream went well, and I'm thinking about repeating that process again for potentially other holidays or just in general, like a monthly thing where we have other people to submit stories, short stories. Does not really matter the genre too much, I believe. And we have it on the reading stream just to get more voices out there as much as we can. I know the reading stream is, well, relatively small, but I like to believe that it is still a mighty reading stream, and we should, well, use the reading stream to our advantage. So if you happen to be someone who likes writing or want to tell a story and you think to yourself, boy, I wouldn't mind having Taco read my story online for everybody to hear, well, send me a message, either on Blue Sky or on Twitch or on YouTube. As far as other news goes, I have been considering this for some time, but there is a possibility that the reading stream will have its own Twitch and YouTube channel. I have not fully thought it all the way through just yet. I blame life there. But something I've considered is The reading stream, I believe, is a very special thing. It's not the reading rainbow, unfortunately, but it is a hobby that I do enjoy doing, especially now on Saturdays again. And it almost seems fitting to give the reading stream its own unique branding. So instead of it being under my Twitch YouTube channels that uses the Takonome, maybe we give it its own channels or the reading stream or something to that nature. Give it its own little branding, if you will. However, if we are to do that, I do not think it will start up this year, but we can plant the seeds this year and begin it at the beginning of next year. Possibilities. However, if we do move the reading stream over to its own channel to have its own branding and whatnot, then I will be sure to let all of you know about that switch. This channel, the Takonome, on Twitch at least, will still be around. For the YouTube channel, uncertain. But I'm sure I'll leave an announcement on the YouTube channel as well, directing people to the new channel if we have one. As far as other news goes, I believe that is everything. I can't think of anything else. Any traveling? There, well, there will be traveling later this month, but it should not affect the reading stream. I believe we'll be back by that Saturday. So all is well there. And with that, I believe we are about ready to start up the reading stream here. Now, because we are in the middle of a series, it only seems fair to do a recap of, well, most of the series without giving away too much spoiler, as well as a recap of what we read last week. Well, not last week, but 2 weeks ago, actually. So, a recap of Clockwork Twist. For most of his life, Twist has been alone. Orphaned as a baby, he would eventually repair clocks in a quiet, cozy shop in London. Thanks to his sight, his supernatural ability, he could repair just about anything simply by touching it to find what is broken. Unfortunately, this worked with people, thus making it virtually impossible for him to make physical contact with others. His life changed when a young woman requested his help to mend the mythical Clockwork Princess. Since then, he has set off his apologies. Since he has set off on his adventure, he has discovered new worlds and made powerful friends and allies along the way. With his sky pirate friend Jonas and wonderful clockwork fiancée Mira by his side, the world is just a little easier to manage. However, it is not all fun and games. Dangerous and ancient forces wish to see his demise and will do anything to make it come true. Through the use of spells and wit, Twist and his friends have managed to avoid their grim fates. After meeting his lost father, accidentally pulling a distant descendant to the past, and journeying to Argentina, Twist and his friends witnessed the impossible. Through the genius of his father and the combined talents of the team, they successfully saved Twist's mother from certain death by pulling her from the past to the present. Additionally, they even managed to return the distant time traveler back to his time period. All's well that ends well. But this is not the end. Altering the timeline often has consequences. There you have it. That is our recap for the evening. And even though we are near the end of this book here, I did put in the order for the final two books of the series. So they should be arriving before the next reading stream. Oh, before I forget, next Saturday, of course, we're going to take a pause from the series to, as we traditionally do with um, pauses between books and titles and whatnot. We take a quick little rebreather, maybe try out a different story, and that is what we're going to be doing next Saturday. It will be a story that was meant for the Halloween stream, but was honestly too long for the Halloween stream, and I think it deserves its own stream instead. So we will read that story next Saturday, November 8th, and return to the Clockwork series on the 15th. Normally we'll have poetry night, which, that's a good question. I will say we will save poetry night for another time. Apologies to Janice T. So, tonight we will finish this book. Next Saturday, we will read the story that was submitted for the Halloween stream that was too long for the stream. And then on the Ides of November, we will go back to Clockwork Twist series. And I believe we are ready. I have my tea. It is still steeping, but it is about ready to go. It is, as always, the water is very hot. I believe that's everything. Had to double check my messages there. I don't think I'll have to take a break midstream, but we will see. Oh, we have a little bit of lore here from the author themselves. Erudite says, appropriate because Twist's birthday is November 17th. I should mark that on my calendar. But I believe we are ready to go. So, with that, this is Clockwork Twist, Book 10, Time by Emily Thompson. We are currently on page 253. And with that, let's begin. Once Robin was locked in time, and Miguel had gathered all he wanted of his notes, charts, and papers from the cavern. He then took out all of the tokens that he used to target Naomi and also pried off a few small, solid gold gears from the various parts of the machine. When asked about this, he mentioned that it was partially a safeguard. With his plans gone and these pieces missing, it would take a lot of effort to make the machine function again. Noting that much of the machine was made of solid gold, Jonas asked if they might take a bit more, but Miguel warned that the time lock might break early, straining Robin in the wrong time if they took too much. Miguel then did as he said he would, closing the trapdoor from above. Once he did this, Twist was surprised to find no obvious opening in the floor at all and assumed that Jinn magic was at work once again. Miguel then left the hut behind him, the door open and all the gardening tools still inside. They'll hire another groundskeeper once I quit, he explained. No one but me can open the trapdoor from above. That's the way I wished it. You really think of everything, don't you? Jonas said admiringly. Miguel gave a shrug, but seemed pleased as well. Now, are we off to France? Oh, yes, Mira said. Kima, we have to get supplies for the journey. Kima agreed to this easily, and the women broke from the group, taking Pamut along with them. Twist, Jonas, and Twist's parents then went to Miguel's little apartment on the church grounds to help him gather his things there. At the sight of his apartment, Naomi once again fell into melancholy. What's the matter? Miguel asked her, pausing from stuffing clothing into a bag. Naomi blinked swiftly and struggled to contain her emotions. I'm sorry, she said, looking about at the dismal little room. I just never thought. You've been alone all this time, living like this because I. Her will broke and tears appeared in her eyes as she covered her mouth with a hand. Miguel rushed to her in a heartbeat, already speaking softly. Twist's heart stung to finally understand the reason for her sorrow. Jonas took his hand and said something swiftly to Miguel, but Twist couldn't focus enough to understand him. His thoughts were too tightly bound around his mother's pain. Jonas pulled him out through the door, down the dim hallways, and into the warm sunlight of the garden. What's going on? Twist asked, startled by all of this. Let your dad handle this, Jonas said somberly. She doesn't need us right now. She needs him. Twist belatedly made sense of Jonas's words to Miguel, a quick mention that they would be waiting on the Icarus. Twist took a deep breath as the cool, calm white fog in Jonas's touch finally broke into his mind, and Twist's tight discomfort began to ebb. Jonas hailed a cab and was already climbing inside before Twist managed to reply to him at all. He sat across from his friend in the cab as it set off and could only marvel at the man. I'm very glad you're here, old chap, Twist said earnestly. I haven't a clue about any of this. I'd be lost without your wisdom. Jonas smirked back at him as if Twist had said something foolish. Well, if there's anything I know about dealing with other people, it's when to leave. Twist nodded, recognizing this gross oversimplification for the deflection that it was. They returned to the Icarus together, and each broke off to follow their own pursuits until the others arrived. Finding himself suddenly free, Twist's thoughts turned to his new book. He snatched it from his cabin and went out into the sunlight on the deck. Sitting comfortably against the low railing, his book propped up on his knees, Twist turned to the first page and read through the opening of the novel, instantly struck by this vastly foreign style of writing. Twist had read many books before, but never anything so sparse and tersely written and yet so immediately engrossing as this work from the future. He nearly felt as if he were reading a different language. Even more so, once the characters began to speak, he saw some of the strange turns of phrases that he heard Robin use. He tried not to be too confused when he read of things he didn't fully understand, such as the telephones, which Robin had initially been so eager to find when he arrived, but he also found the cold and rather disrespectful way in which all of the characters treated each other very strange indeed. As far as he could tell, Sam Spade was in no way a nice man, or anything much like a hero. But even though the world inside this novel felt unsympathetic, Twist found himself eagerly diving headlong into the fascinating plot. When Mira, Kima, and Pamut arrived with fresh supplies brought by a small army of delivery boys, Twist was pleased to find that reality was still bright, pleasant, and friendly, even if the fictional San Francisco of the future wasn't. He put his book away and helped to stow the supplies, reveling in Mira's bright mood. Look at this, Mira said with glee, showing him a new plant. It's an orchid. Isn't it pretty? She asked, cooing at the colorful blue blossom that stood up on its tall, slender stalk. That's a lovely color, Twist replied. I'm going to run out of the room in the kitchen for all my new plants, Mira mentioned. I'm telling you, Kima said to her, you should keep them out here on the deck. They will get more sun out here too. Yes, Twist agreed. That sounds like a good idea. Why, you could build up a garden of potted plants. Almira began to ponder how she might display her plants out on the deck, trading notions with Kima. Twist quietly slipped closer and placed a hand on Mira's waist. Her sunny delight soaked into his sight, while she only smiled at him and stepped slightly closer in reply to the touch, not even pausing in her conversation. Twist took a deep breath, catching a hint of the exotic bloom Mira held and savoring the simple pleasures of standing silently beside his future wife while she talked about something that she loved. If his father felt at all about his mother the way that Twist felt about Mira, then Twist was sure that all of the man's toil and struggle, Even the years apart were an easy price for Miguel to pay to have his stolen love beside him again. As cruel as life had been to both of his parents, Twist hoped that his mother might soon see that there was no more reason to be sad. They were together again. Surely, that was all they needed. We're going to take a break here. I want to give a quick apologies for Mira's voice because that may have been the worst Mira voice I've ever done. But as I've said before on the reading stream, Mira's voice is the hardest voice for me to pull off consistently and well. Nevertheless, I do hope that you are all enjoying this reading stream as well as the story and reading of this story. Gonna see if the tea is ready here. Mm. Now that it's gotten chillier where I live, piping hot tea goes down very easily. Well, perhaps not piping hot, more of a yes, I still wouldn't put my finger in that tea hot. Mm. We will set that there. I will say it is very satisfying to have a physical copy of a book in hand and just to listen to the pages ruffle by as you go to your page. There's just, it's very satisfying in my opinion. But I digress. Now I digress. Okay, a little bit of a stretch. And with that, we will go into our next chapter. The Icarus set off that day once everyone was back aboard. Miguel had seemingly abandoned many of his possessions, only bringing a few bags of clothing, papers, and books along from his apartment. When he and Naomi rejoined the Icarus, Twist was glad to see a lighter air in his mother, and she even smiled and laughed as Jonas and Mira told her stories of Twist's adventure over dinner, while the Atlantic Ocean passed quietly below them. At first, Twist tried to downplay their spirited exclamations about his personal daring, but soon he realized that it was a pointless exercise. Even Kima joined in as well, telling her own tales of Twist. His parents listened with rapt attention, marveling at Twist's encounters with magical creatures, faraway places, and thrilling danger. They laughed and gasped in all the right places, while Twist's friends made him look like something out of a fantasy novel. By the time everyone started to run out of tales and the fatigue of the day began to show, Twist had grown numb to the constant praise and amazement. He slept soundly in Mira's arms that night, dreaming of his own adventures and reliving dream versions of his past days. The next morning, Jonas mentioned that they might reach France rather soon. Flying to the east, they would have the wind with them for most of the trip, and France was somewhat closer to Argentina than England was. But with at least a full day still ahead of them, a calm and languid atmosphere took over the airship. The day was relatively uneventful for the Icarus, but quite stressful for Sam Spade. Twist spent most of his day reading. When he looked up from his book, he was happy to see that Naomi's mood remained as light as Mira's, as Naomi and Miguel helped Mira to set out most of her plants in a true garden that clustered to one side of the glass enclosed deck. They stacked empty crates together to create a staggered sort of display rack for Mira's potted plants, and Mira repotted even more new plants that she had gathered from Argentina to add to the collection. Miguel spent almost every moment beside his wife throughout the day, the two of them clearly enjoying their hard won peace. Jonas spent some time staring at the sky with his music player beside him, and after a while, Pama joined him, squinting into the brilliant blue as well. Kima kept mostly to herself, as she often did, but after lunch, she, Jonas, and Pamba took turns playing a few long, languid games of chess against each other. By the end of the match, it seemed that all of them had won at least one game each, so it was hard to decide on a winner. To Twist's surprise, it was just after twilight when he spotted the yellow light of civilization out ahead of them in the darkness under the stars. When Twist checked his pocket globe, he found that Portugal and the western coast of Spain were beginning to slip by below them as they sped toward France. Naomi and Miguel joined Twist at the rail, peering out at the distant lights as the distant lights crept closer. Mother? Twist asked, turning to Naomi. It was only after the word was out of his mouth that he realized, with a flicker of anxious shock, that he never addressed her in this way before in his entire life. Oui, mon petit, she replied, looking to him sweetly. Twist assumed what this meant. I just wanted to ask you, he said, struggling to shake off his own awkwardness. Was I really born in Paris? Mama told me I was. Yes, you were, she answered. We oh, we made up a nursery for you in our apartment, Miguel added with a soft sigh, standing on her other side. All in light blue, Naomi said, her tone mirroring his. I knew you would be a boy, she added. It's a simple spell to check that before you were born. Twist shook his head. Right, because you really are, well, a witch. Yes, I am, Naomi said easily. Why do you say it like that? I grew up thinking witchcraft was a bad thing, Twist answered with a shrug. Now I'm living with it on a daily basis. I guess it's not so bad after all. Well, Naomi said uncertainly, if I hadn't been a witch, I never would have asked the fairies what was wrong with your sight. Maybe it's not so good either, she added, forcing her words to lighten. Miguel patted gently at her back. That's all in the past now, Twist said out of reflex. Miguel looked at him, watching him closely, while Naomi seemed suddenly unable to meet Twist's eyes. Her face appeared troubled in the dim light. Twist turned to look directly at his mother, drawing her gaze to him. I'm glad you're here, safe and sound, Mother. Everything's worked out in the end. Miguel looked at him gratefully, but said nothing. I'm glad you think so, Naomi said, looking at Twist with a warm smile. I hope I can learn to think as you do someday. As do I, Twist replied earnestly. Suddenly surprised at himself, Twist frowned in alarm. He'd only known this woman for 2 days, and he spent the entirety of his life before then endeavoring to forget her existence completely. Had he really grown to think of her this fondly, this quickly? Had there ever been a moment when he hadn't desperately wanted her happiness since they had met? If she hadn't told the fairies about him, he would have indeed grown up in that blue nursery, somewhere in Paris. His childhood would have been filled with family support, guidance, compassion, and actual love. Twist shivered when he realized that his first language would have probably been French, his second language Spanish, and English an afterthought, if he learned it at all. He definitely would have been raised Catholic. He would have spent his whole life wearing his real name, and he might have even attended a university instead of going right to work in a clock shop. Even with the limitations of his sight, he would have grown into a relatively ordinary and undamaged man. It seemed just as strange, impossible, and foreign a world as the dark streets of Sam Spay's futuristic San Francisco. Tristan? Naomi asked gently, stirring him from his thoughts. Are you all right? It was only then that Twist noticed that his reaction to his own epiphany had been perfectly visible to them both. His parents were watching him with concern. He looked back at his mother, meaning to explain, but then paused. Her eyes were filled with welcoming warmth, and they were somehow very deeply comforting to behold. Twist could see her love for him in her eyes so clearly that it couldn't be denied. He shook his head, amazed to find that right now, even after realizing all of her mistakes had cost him, he couldn't bring himself to resent her for any of it. I'm fine, he said. I just thought of something surprising. What's that? Naomi asked cautiously. Twist shook his head. I'm glad you're here. His mother smiled, her eyes somehow growing even warmer. His father looked deeply pleased as well, seeming just as much at peace beside his family as any man could. Twist tried not to show it, but their acceptance and care for him still felt awkward and undeserved. He knew he should be at ease, but he simply couldn't be. Not yet. He still needed more time to grow accustomed to having a family at all. Here we're taking another chapter break. I see. Mm. Now, because this reading stream will be shorter than normal, I feel that maybe now is an appropriate time to talk about something. Mm. Oh, that's delicious. What is delicious, you may be asking? Well, I'm drinking a staple of the reading stream here, the Clockmaker. It is a tea inspired by the series that we are reading right now. And the Clockmaker tea is comprised of roasted green tea, regular green tea, orange peel, black tea, pure tea, rose petal, and pine smoke. And you can really taste that pine smoke in this tea. I believe it is the pine smoke that really brings this tea out and makes it perhaps one of my top three favorite teas. And you may be thinking to yourself, why Taka? I hear you. That tea does sound great and delicious and wonderful, but I don't know where I could find tea like that. Well, my dear listener, allow me the opportunity and honestly the privilege to tell you about a tea shop in Seattle, Washington. A tea shop that we talk about every reading stream because I enjoy their teas. A tea shop, I promise, they are not blackmailing me to say these things. The tea shop is Friday afternoon in Seattle, Washington. That's right, it is time for a not sponsored, definitely not a sponsorship, but we're going to pretend it's a sponsorship because it's fun to pretend it's a sponsorship, though it's not a sponsorship from Friday afternoon. If you go to the website www.fridaytea.com, you will find a wide variety of teas that I know will tickle your fancies. Now, tonight, I want to tell you about this tea called Red Viper, and it is available until December 3rd. So if this tea sounds enticing to you, I would hop on fridaytea.com and, well, buy yourself a batch before they're out of season. But this tea is inspired by the Game of Thrones, which they have an entire collection inspired by the show slash book on their website. But this tea, as the description goes, this sensual blend of rich red and earthy green teas flaunts a truly intoxicating aroma and full body mouth feel. Slink into this relaxing afternoon delight inspired by Game of Thrones. Ingredients: green tea, orange peel, rooibos, cinnamon, raw dandelion root, and rose petal. And we have 3 5-star reviews here. The first review we'll be reading is from October of 2024. This person wrote, delicious. Is good ice too. Just needs a hint of honey. From July of 2024, this person wrote, This tea is the reason I miss the time fandom teas were year round. I run out of it too quickly and then have to wait a whole year to get it again. Ridiculous. I'm going to take that as a positive thing for this tea. They did give it 5 stars. And finally, the last review here is from March of 2022. They wrote, "Wonderful. This is my favorite tea. I brewed a bit hot and add a good spoonful of wild honey, and it's become my go-to." Mm, honey with this tea actually does sound very nice. Nevertheless, so if you think this tea would be interesting to you, it is called the Red Viper, and again, you could find it on their website at www.fridaytea.com. Again, that website is www.friday like the day and tea like the drink.com. And again, they do not pay me to do this. I don't know if they know I still do this or not. I've never reached out and asked. They are not holding my cats hostage. They are not telling me that my wife will divorce me if I don't say these nice things about them or anything like that. No, I just enjoy their teas. And do not listen to what Ace is saying. He wrote, "Sounds like something someone would be blackmailed would say. Someone who's being blackmailed would say. And I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, and even deeper below that, that I am not being blackmailed. And if you could see me, you will see that I am not blinking twice if I'm in distress." It's a good tea. Also, welcome, Ace. How are you doing today? Erudite wrote, "Say anything enough and it sounds like a lie." Well, I will definitely not lie about Friday afternoon, the tea shop in Seattle, Washington that does not blackmail me or even have any way to extort me, really. I don't feel extortable by Friday afternoon, the tea shop in Seattle, Washington, www.fridaytea.com. Okay, now it sounds like I'm being blackmailed. But I will say, and I first found out about Friday Tea years ago when we started the reading stream in, oh my, I believe we started in 2022. I really need to write this down. I continue to think I started in 2023, but that is incorrect. We started the reading stream in 2022, not December, January of 2022. And of course, our first book was Clockwork Twist, Book 1, Waking, which again, I want to give a special shout out again to Erudite, the author of the series, who graciously allowed me the opportunity to read them online. Now, I would say that it was done because, well, we were friends and we had Japanese class together in Japan and also some shared memories there, but I would like to think that I was allowed to read these stories because one, it honestly is a fun series. If you have missed out on the Clockwork Twist series, I highly recommend, if this stream has been of any interest, if the story sounds intriguing to you, I highly recommend going back to book one. Start from there. There is so much that the recap does not cover for this series because to cover it all will give so many spoilers away, and all these spoilers work together as well to make a very compelling story. There are characters that you'll meet in one book and you think, oh, they're just a character. And then books later, and I cannot stress that enough, books later, you will find out just how important that character was to the plot and the overall world building. I enjoy it. I enjoy that I cannot easily predict what will happen. And even when I feel that I have an idea what might happen, it does not happen the way I originally believed it would. So, again, if this series sounds intriguing to you, if you think, boy, I would like to know more of what happened, check out the series. It is available on Amazon print and I believe digitally in multiple store shops or bookshops, if you will. Let's see here. I think I had my fill of tea for now. So, with that, we are going to go into our next chapter after a quick stretch. It has been somewhat of a long day for me, but that is neither here nor there. So, let us go into our next chapter. Peering into the. Ooh, apologies. That was terrible. Let's start over. Peering into the thick, dark woods that clustered far below on the rugged, rolling landscape of northern France, Jonas finally spotted signs of the gypsy camp in the soft silver light of the moon and the sky full of stars. Although Twist couldn't see anything in the darkness himself, not even the glow of the campfires, Jonas announced that the camp had indeed moved since their last visit. Nonetheless, he brought the Icarus in to dock at the edge of a wood. Kima roped the tree and Twist cut off the engines. Descending the rope ladder to the ground just after Kima, Twist suddenly remembered the original cause for his last visit. The last time he climbed down a rope ladder, it had been to visit a mysterious troop of men and women he'd never met. More than that, he'd been covered in dragon's blood at the time, which had caused him to hallucinate quite a bit. The monstrous beast had even managed to take full possession of Twist in the final moments before Mama had finally removed it entirely. It was only afterward that Twist had learned that Mama was his own blood relation. This time, he was not only returning to a family he knew as his own, but doing so with both of his parents beside him. Bewildered by the path his life was taking him down, Twist could only sigh and shake his head as he and the others began to walk through the gloom of the dark forest. They carried swiftly through they carried swiftly made torches that cast a flickering yellow glow against the trees, but Pamuk clung close to his mother, watching out into the shadows as if he were afraid of an attack. As the rest of his family and crew descended the ladder, Twist caught himself feeling nervous as well, for more reasons than one. A warm hand fell on his back, spilling a cool white fog into his sight. Are you all right? Jonas asked softly, not drawing attention from the others. Twist sighed again and shook his head. I have no idea. Jonas chuckled. Chin up, old boy. At least this time you're not covered in dragon's blood. Twist laughed. I was actually just thinking that. Stop reading my mind, you freak, Jonas said with a grin, shoving at him. Twist suddenly realized that he had an audience, as some of the others were glancing at them now. I thought of it first, Twist countered, nearly laughing again. You're the one reading my mind. That's just what a mind reader would say, Jonas said, his voice loud and clear, his sapphire blue eyes narrowing at Twist. The sound of laughter made them both turn to find Naomi, clearly very much amused by them. Twist and Jonas looked back at her sheepishly, though Jonas's eyes never lost their blue, and Twist felt a tiny thrill in his own heart at making her laugh. I'm sorry, she said. Tristan, you seem like such a proud gentleman. I'm glad to see you can still be playful too. Twist could only look back at her silently while her comments echoed inside him, turning things to gold. She thought of him as a proud gentleman. Are you calling us silly? Jonas asked Naomi, his tone warning but his eyes still bright blue. Unexpected fright licked through Twist as he feared that Naomi might not take Jonas's baiting the way he truly meant it. Standing beside Naomi, Miguel seemed mildly offended already. Kima looked at Jonas in silent surprise. While Twist struggled to think of a way to clarify, Naomi smiled knowingly at Jonas with perfect confidence. I'd rather be silly than boring, Naomi said. Wouldn't you? Twist felt a ripple of delight in the buzzing at his neck, but Jonas's expression only showed the slightest gleam of it. No one calls me boring and lives, Jonas declared. Well, you're not boring, Kima interjected. Jonas looked toward her suspiciously. Twist, I think we're being made light of. Kima laughed to herself. So did Nomi and Mira. Twist could only marvel at how delightful seeing their joy felt to him, even without his sight to help him share their feelings. He shook his head. Where are we going anyway? He asked, hoping to get things back on track. At the moment, we seem to be wandering aimlessly in the woods. It's just up there, Jonas said, pointing into the trees. There are markings on the trees that lead to the camp if you know how to read them. How do you know how to read them? Naomi asked, surprised. Oh, I grew up in Mama's camp after I lost my parents, Jonas answered, remarkably lightly. Didn't someone mention that? You grew up with my family? Naomi gasped, clearly astonished. Well, yes, Jonas answered as he and the rest of the group continued to walk under the trees. I didn't have a clue about the Fae or any of it, but the second Mama laid eyes on me, she knew exactly who I was. She told me recently that my sight looks just like Twist. She took my sister and I in until we were old enough to go treasure hunting with my uncle. If it wasn't for her protection, the fairies would have killed me a long time ago. That's amazing, Naomi said, shaking her head. Mama never takes in outsiders. But then, I guess she didn't consider you an outsider, Jonas, she added. Stealing a glance at her, Twist could see that she didn't either. No, Mama used to whack me on the head when I acted up, and the same as all the other children, Jonas said fondly. That kind of thing really makes a bloke feel like part of a family. Naomi laughed lightly at this and nodded. Mira's clockwork hand slipped silently into place on Twist's arm as they walked, and he instinctively bent an elbow to make it more comfortable for her to hold. Warm, sparkling comfort flooded into his sight, as thick as honey. He looked to Mira to find her smiling warmly at Jonas and Naomi before glancing to him with meaning in her jewel eyes. As was so rarely the case, Twist felt he knew exactly what she was thinking. Naomi was knitting herself effortlessly into their family, as if she'd always belonged. Miguel wasn't unpleasant to be around, but Naomi got Jonas's jokes. Turning around a thick clump of trees, Twist was startled to find the camp suddenly in light, just a few feet away. The central fire was smoking and glowing in the gathering gloom of evening, surrounded by tents, wooden carriages, and a large number of men, women, and children, but Twist hadn't noticed a single sign of any of it until making that final turn. Jonas, Naomi, and Miguel all seemed to find nothing strange about this, but all of the others looked just as surprised as Twist. Even after spending time around this odd illusion on his last visit, Twist still couldn't believe it had fooled him again. Walking closer, Twist spotted the banner bearing the invisibility charm hanging above a gap in the trees that led into the circular clearing where the camp stood. Pumut's face lit up with amazement at the sight of the camp, promising that his magical senses saw more than Twist did. It was only after a moment of confusion that Twist remembered that Pumut had never been to this camp before. It had been Storm who had arrived suddenly and attacked Twist and Jonas the first time they come here. Twist spotted Luca, Jonas's childhood friend with the floppy hat and large black mustache, sitting against one tree beside the gap, apparently napping. Jonas approached and stopped one step away from the sleeping gypsy, while the others gathered behind him. Hey! Jonas shouted, kicking at the man's leg. You call yourself a guard? Lucas started, his arms flailing for an instant before they caught the ground. He peered up at Jonas with a clearly still swimming head, and then gave a shout and leapt to his feet. Johnny! He gasped, smiling now. Before Jonas could respond, Luca pulled him into a swift embrace. Bless my stars, what are you doing here? He asked, pushing Jonas back and looking over the others. I thought you lot were heading for Atlantis with those magpies. Been and gone, Jonas replied. We picked up a few people along the way, he added, glancing back to Naomi and Miguel. I'd introduce them to you, but I think Mama would kill me if she heard me say their names outside of the circle. You vouch for them? Luca asked, eyeing Twist's parents. Then his eyes caught Salt of Pamut, and he jumped a step back over the line of the edge of the camp. The satyr! He yelped in obvious fear. No, no, Jonas said swiftly, his hands up. It's not the satyr. This is Pamut. He's human. He's Kima's real son. It's fine, Luca. Pamut was clinging to his mother tightly now, watching Luca in fright. How the hell is that possible? Luca asked Jonas. It's a long story, Jonas answered, dropping his hands now. Can I please tell it to you inside the circle? Luca still seemed reluctant, eyeing Naomi, Miguel, Pamut, and even Kima suspiciously. Naomi stepped forward, speaking to him in an admonishing tone, but a language that sounded like French to Twist. Luca gasped at this, looking back at her in clear amazement. Mira also seemed surprised by whatever Naomi had said, while Jonas laughed. Fine, fine, come in, Luca said, swollen but relaxed now. He ushered them across the deep groove that had been drawn in the dirt across the entryway before rushing further inside the camp to call out to an older gypsy man who was walking by. Harmon, Luca's father and Twist's uncle by blood, stopped in his tracks and then approached him. Twist recognized the man instantly, having traveled with him and Luca from Peru to Sierra Leone on a mission to battle vampires. Harmon stepped closer and began to speak questioningly to his son, but then caught sight of Naomi. Her eyes already full of blissful tears, Naomi leapt forward with open arms, giving a cry in the same language she had spoken before. Harmon's face paled and washed over with amazement as he rushed to catch her in his arms. As he began to speak swiftly back to her, all Twist understood was the sound of his mother's name among the other unfamiliar syllables. Naomi struggled to reply to her brother through her happy tears. Mira took Twist's hand, her excitement striking him like full sunlight. She smiled to him her joy at whatever she must have understood in their words. Twist then noticed that his father, who still stood with the others while Naomi had left him, looked as if he was struggling not to cry with joy as well. Jonas and the others remained well out of the way while Luca stared in silent shock. It didn't take long for the commotion to draw attention. A woman nearly as old as Harmon gasped and rushed toward them, shrieking in their language, but also in obvious disbelieving joy. More and more people approached either with curiosity or tearful amazement until Twist recognized Mama's voice in the fray. All of the other voices fell silent, and those now crowded around Naomi moved aside. Mama stepped closer, past the others, her sharp, cold, gray-blue eyes narrowed at the obvious ruckus. She stood with proud strength in every fiber of her being, her clothing as rugged and practical as her bearing, and her long gray hair tied back at the nape of her neck. Then she caught sight of her daughter, just as young and beautiful as the last day she'd seen her alive. It took nearly 3 seconds for her natural cold energy to melt away, and for anguish, astonishment, and relief to fill her whole spirit. Her hands rose, shaking, to cover her gaping mouth as a single word escaped her. Twist shivered to hear his mother's name on Mama's lips. Naomi's tears didn't cease at all as she nodded and rushed toward her mother. Mama caught her with a cry of deep pain and breathtaking joy. For a moment, they only held each other, tears streaming onto each other's shoulders, while the rest of the camp looked on with silent emotion. Then Mama began questioning, and eventually, Naomi answered by turning to her husband. He saved me, she said, now in English, her voice weak from tears. He built that time machine he always was talking about, and he pulled me here from the past. Miguel had wiped the tears from his own face, but his eyes were still red. Naomi looked back at Mama with a flicker of pride and an ocean of quiet joy. You, Mama breathed, staring at Miguel, her face still devoid of all of its usual strength. Come here, and let me kiss you, you beautiful man, she shouted, waving at him. Miguel laughed and did as he was told. Mama took one arm away from her daughter, grabbed him around the neck, and pulled him down, kissing him once on each cheek before pulling him into a hug. Miguel allowed all of this with a wide smile, one hand slipping around his wife's waist. Twist was startled to find his own eyes dampening to witness this deeply emotional scene. Noticing this with a double take, Jonas grinned at Twist and tossed an arm across his shoulders. The cool white fog and the touch soothed Twist's own emotions refreshingly. You old softy, Jonas chided. Twist laughed and shook his head. He didn't think he had the will to even pretend to be offended right now. His heart was too full, seeing his mother so happy, safe, and home in the arms of her family. We're going to take a quick break before the final chapter of the evening. Once again, everyone, I do want to thank you for joining this reading stream, whether you're here live on Twitch or YouTube, or you're listening to the VODs. I hope that you have been enjoying the story as well as the reading of this story. Checking something here. Okay. I think we're still okay for now. And with that, we are going into our final chapter of the evening. Okay. There was a siren going by. Wasn't too sure how much of that was being picked up. However, final chapter of the evening, end of the story, this book. Not the story. We have two more books to go. So with that, let us begin. That night, there was a feast. Men and women broke into song, dancing to music played on simple instruments, and Mira quickly joined in the dance. Jonas joined her as well and taught her the steps, while the gypsies welcomed them both into the dancing ring around the fire. Twist found himself inundated with delicious but simple food and very strong drink, and he did his best to politely accept as much as he could without being overwhelmed. Kima and Pamut watched the celebration with obvious wonder, and soon Kima also got up to join Jonas and Mira in dance. As Twist had expected, there had been a tense moment when many of the other gypsies recognized Pamut's face and thought that he was Storm. Mama, however, wasn't fooled. She declared that the boy was harmless, innocent, and perfectly human long before anyone got a chance to attack him. Kima swiftly explained that she had killed Storm herself with the help of Jonas and other friends, calling the hearty cheers of congratulations and amazement from the gypsies. Now, Pamut found himself just as welcome as anyone else. Miguel and Naomi remained close, sitting to watch the dance while it seemed that the entire camp was taking turns coming up to greet them and to say something kind. Twist wondered silently if some of the more gently chiding tones he heard spoken to Naomi might have been something to do with the fact that, sitting beside her, Miguel looked old enough to be her father. Neither of his parents had mentioned this in front of him, but Twist imagined it might be particularly strange for Naomi. After all, she hadn't experienced any of the years between them. While Twist remained sitting on a log near his parents, Pamut was drawn away by some of the gypsy's children. Mama sat close to Miguel and Naomi, seeming to only gaze at her daughter in silence, as if afraid that she might have vanished if she looked away. After a while, though, her eyes took on a thoughtful edge. Twist didn't see her slip away, but did notice that she was suddenly gone. She returned a while later, approaching Miguel. Here, she said to him, standing beside him and holding out a small cup. Drink this. Miguel looked up to her. What is it? He asked, taking the cup and examining its contents. It's the only thing I can do to thank you for bringing my daughter back to life, Mama answered. Naomi peered into the cup and then looked up to her mother in amazement. Miguel glanced to Naomi, still holding the cup but not yet bringing it anywhere near his lips. Will this turn me into a toad? Mama chuckled. You did make a darling toad, she mentioned. But no, this won't. Go ahead, Naomi said to Miguel. If it's what I think it is, it's safe. Miguel looked at the cup suspiciously once more but gave a sigh. He then closed his eyes and took the entire contents in one troubled looking swallow. Twist watched with great interest as his father grimaced against the flavor of the potion and gave the empty cup back to Mama. At first, nothing seemed to happen at all. Then, slowly, Miguel's form began to change. First, his graying hair turned to pure jet black. Then, Twist watched in amazement as the wrinkles around his eyes smoothed out and his skin tone grew warmer. Miguel's body seemed to slim, taking on a more slender and graceful shape. Clearly feeling these changes, Miguel shuddered and reached up to touch his own face. Noticing his hands, he stared at them in disbelief, watching them turn supple and strong. Twist realized that his own mouth was hanging slightly open in astonishment as he watched the years fall off of his father. In moments, the man looked younger than even Twist. Naomi's smile grew as she watched her husband become once again as young as her. Mama only gazed at the effect proudly. Is this an illusion? Miguel asked, his voice breathless, but smoother now and weightless of his years as well. No, it's not, Mama answered. Miguel looked to Naomi in bewilderment. Naomi's face was filled to the brim with joy as she pulled him closer. That's my Miguel, she said, holding him tightly. Thank you, she added to her mother, looking worried now. But what about you? I'll be fine, Mama said dismissively. I still have one more, and that will last me long enough. She looked to Miguel, quite pleased with her work. I can't take the troubled years from your mind, but I can give you back some of your youth. I hope that, this time, you will spend it in safety and peace. I don't know what to say, Miguel said, looking up to Mama in wonder. You've given back my life. You've given me back my daughter, Mama said, reaching out to pat at his shoulder. Keep taking good care of her, and I don't think I'll ever have to turn you into a toad again. Miguel laughed, nodding. He turned back to his wife, his young face now awash with joy. I'll never spend another day without you. Naomi pulled him into a passionate kiss, causing Twist to look away while his cheeks felt suddenly overly warm. Is that Miguel? Jonas asked, sitting down beside Twist and startling him. What happened to him? Twist forced himself to calm with a single breath before he answered. Mama gave him a potion. Now I have two parents who are younger than I am. Jonas shook his head, looking troubled. Your life is weird, Twist. Twist chuckled, nodding. Good heavens, yes. Wait a minute, Jonas said suddenly. They're both alive, healthy, and young as spring chickens. Twist, maybe Robin wasn't related to you, but to a sibling of yours. I don't have any siblings, Twist answered instantly. Then he paused, catching up with Jonas's true meaning. He looked back at his parents suspiciously. They had both fallen into conversation with Mama now, Nomi's arms wrapped around Miguel's middle and his arm up around her shoulders. Are you suggesting they might have another child? Twist asked Jonas, careful not to let his voice catch their attention. Why not? Jonas asked with a roguish grin. The first one might have started out a bit rough, but he turned out alright in the end. Why wouldn't they give parenting another go? Stunned by this arguably quite obvious idea, Twist stared at his parents while his mind flew after implications. Sights weren't usually known to run in families. Sighted parents didn't always have sighted children, and the opposite was also true. If Twist's parents did have another child, there was no reason to assume that it would be sighted at all, let alone bearing one so troubling as Twist's. They would be able to raise this child without fear of evil fairies coming to murder anyone. An ordinary child wouldn't shrink from their affection. All of their original hopes for Twist would fall easily to a new child. A wave of unexpected jealousy washed over Twist, chilling his heart. Surprised at himself, Twist shook his head to try to clear this nonsensical thought from his mind. Did I say something wrong? Jonas asked, suddenly cautious as he watched Twist with lavender eyes. No, no, Twist answered, instantly knowing that this sudden shift in mood was perfectly apparent to Jonas. It's nothing. You must be right, he added, hoping to deflect attention. That has to be it. They'll have another child, and that person will be Robin's ancestor. Well, at least you now know your own heritage, Jonas said, patting Twist on the back. I can imagine that it's pretty difficult to be yourself when you don't even know who you are. Oh, yes, Twist said, smirking back at him. You've always known your own, haven't you? Why, you're a pure pirate through and through. On both sides of my family, Jonas said proudly. As far back as 1600s. Actually, Twist, now that I think of it, you and I are technically on opposite sides, he added with a suspicious expression in sky blue eyes. I told you before, my family being nothing but French and English pirates. We've been after Spanish gold for generations. I haven't got any gold, Twist said with a shrug, and I hardly think I'm all that Spanish. Maybe not, Jonas said, his eyes still narrowed. But if you fall into any real wealth, just know that I'll take no responsibility for my actions. It's in my blood. I can't help it. Bloody pirate brigand, Twist grumbled. Covertly Spanish dandy, Jonas snapped back. Twist laughed and shook his head. While the fog in Jonas's touch turned smooth and bright and his eyes went blue, Twist felt a comfortable calm fall over himself as well. He glanced back toward the roaring fire at the center of the camp and found Mira's clockwork form glinting in the light as she danced with the gypsies. Kima laughed at some joke that Luca had said, swatting at him while he grinned guiltily. Twist also caught sight of Pamut playing some sort of game with the other children, and apparently having a very nice time at it. Looking back to his parents, he found them sitting together quietly and holding hands while they watched the dancers. Despite all the trials and sudden shocks that had arisen since, Twist had unexpectedly been reunited with his father, and all of the emotional turmoil that meeting his mother had caused. Everything was now perfectly calm. Twist realized with a smile that he had once again survived, unscathed and even better by his trial. He allowed himself a moment of optimism, hoping that the complex relationships he now had to traverse with his parents weren't beyond his abilities to conquer as well. After all, Mira was happy, and Jonas was beside him. What more did he really need? Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of Clockwork Twist, Book 10, Time, by Emily Thompson. As I mentioned before, we have two more books in the series before we can close out the reading of this series. Next Saturday, we will be taking a break from the series as we will read the story submitted to us for the Halloween stream. That was too long for the Halloween stream. I'm looking forward to reading it. It sounds, based on the title, it sounds very interesting, but we will save that for next time. And when we return on November 15th, apparently 2 days before Twist's birthday, we will continue reading the Clockwork Twist series. Once again, I want to thank you all for the support that you give these channels, whether it is the Twitch or YouTube channels. Again, there is also a possibility that the reading stream will have its own channel at the beginning of the new year. We will I will keep you apprised of any updates on that. And I hope that you all enjoyed the story as well as the reading of this story. I see from Ace. Well, then, after this series, we need another Emily Thompson series. Well, Erudite, if you're still here listening, if you happen to have another series ready to go, by all means, let us know. And you, dear listener, if you happen to be a writer or somebody who just wants to share stories with the reading stream, be sure to leave me a message either on my Blue Sky accounts, the Takonome, or my Twitch or YouTube channels, also by the Takonome. And with that, I bid you all adieu. I hope that you all have a safe and wonderful weekend. And remember to be kind, stay safe, and to take care of each other. And Erudite says, I got some unpublished books, some sci-fi too. Originally for the reading stream, I thought to do only published books, but honestly, we're going to branch out to unpublished books or stories as well, if the author does not mind. Of course, we always get permission from the author before we do these type of readings. But we will end the reading stream here. Everyone, again, take care, be safe, and I will see you next time. Until then, bye bye.